The 2 front row seats had their names on them. They did not come. I removed the placards, tied a red ribbon to the chair backs, and rewrote the tags, reserved for those who show up. As I raised my hand to swear the oath, 2 strangers clutched my parents' tickets, and a different door opened, one that no longer led back to my old family. My name is Delilah Cash Cook. The Denver sunrise shattered against the glass of the Byron White United States Courthouse. It was a cold light, metallic and sharp. Small, stubborn patches of old snow clung to the edges of the frozen grass. In my small apartment, I ran the iron over the last crease in my navy blue dress. The small, square box holding the flag pin sat on my dresser, right next to the formal invitation letter. It listed my guest seats, A12 and A13. My phone buzzed on the dresser, the vibration harsh against the wood. A text message from my mother. Got to take Evan to look at that car. So sorry. Honey, we'll make it up to you. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered. I typed, "It's okay." I stared at the 2 words, the lie feeling heavy and familiar. I deleted them. Then, with a sigh that left no fog in the warm room, I typed, "It's okay" again, and pressed send. I turned to my small printer and fed in a sheet of cardstock. I printed 2 small, formal name tags, Mom Cook, Dad Cook. My hand was steady. Mostly, I kept my face perfectly, expressionlessly, calm. In the grand, cold marble lobby, the check-in clerk gave me a professional smile. Just a reminder, each new citizen is allowed 2 guests for the front row. Your seats are A12 and A13. I nodded, holding the 2 printed tags in my hand. I found a plain red envelope in my bag. I slid the 2 tickets inside, on impulse. I also slipped in a spare 2x2 passport photo of myself, one I had not needed for the application. It felt like a small, silent goodbye to the girl in the picture. Standing before the security checkpoint, I watched the other families. It was a long line of relatives. They were easy to spot. They were the ones holding bright bouquets of sunflowers, clutching miniature American flags, and already dabbing at their eyes with tissues. A gust of wind from the automatic doors opening and closing pulled at the thin red ribbon I had tied around my own wrist that morning. The color was deep, like blood, a small, flapping declaration that I would have to save myself. I made the decision right there, under the high, echoing ceilings. If they would not come, the seats would not be empty. I could see them in my mind, a quick, cinematic pan. Seats, A12 and A13, empty and gleaming under the bright fluorescent lights of the auditorium, waiting for a different script to be written. I took a breath. My heart timed its beat to the heavy, official sound I could hear from the auditorium down the hall, the thud of a USCS officer's stamp. Thump, thump. Final, approved. Those 2 empty seats, A12 and A13, were not a new phenomenon. I come from a long, documented line of empty seats. My entire childhood was structured around the empty spaces where people were supposed to be. I was raised in Redfield, New Mexico. It was a fictional town before I even learned the word. A small cluster of houses defined by the coal mine that was coughing up its last breath and the suffocating red dust that coated everything. That dust was an invasion. It got into your lungs, settled in the grain of the church pews, and filled the creases of your hands. Our tiny church was the town's center of gravity, but its parking lot, a sea of that red grit, always seemed to have more empty spaces than full ones. My father, Miguel, was a man of that dust. He lived in it, breathed it. He was a self-taught mechanic, a quiet man who smelled perpetually of engine grease and iron filings. He could listen to a sputtering engine and diagnose its failure by sound alone, as if he spoke its language. He believed in things you could hold, things you could fix with your own 2 hands. He did not believe in applause. "Self-reliant kids don't need cheering," he would say, his voice rough as he wiped his hands on a rag that had long ago given up on being clean. His hands were incredible, always moving, always fixing something that was broken, but they never seemed to find their way to my shoulder. never learned how to clap for me. To my father, emotional support was a luxury, like buying a brand new car part when a salvaged one from the junkyard would do the job just fine. I was the salvaged part. I worked. I did not require polishing. My mother, Joanne, lived in the air. She sang in the church choir, and her voice was the one thing that seemed to rise above the red dust that settled on the hymn books. But her true devotion, her real religion, was my brother, Evan. Evan was Redfield's golden boy, the high school quarterback, the football star destined to get us out of here. My mother was his agent, his publicist, his road manager. She managed every single minute of his schedule. From weightlifting sessions to pep rallies, his triumphs were her triumphs. His schedule was the family schedule. And I was Delilah. I was the person who held the supplies. At church pageants, I was the one holding the tangled bundles of silk decoration ropes. At Evan's endless award dinners, I held the extra napkins and filled the water glasses. I was always helping out, which is a polite term people use when they need you to be invisible but functional. I was the infrastructure, the stagehand, the quiet girl who makes sure the star's spotlight is plugged in and aimed correctly. No one ever, not once, thinks to thank the person who plugs in the light. They only notice you if the light goes out. I learned this lesson with a searing clarity on my 9th birthday. It fell on the exact same day that Evan found out he had made the varsity team. A spectacular feat for a freshman. Our small house filled with the heavy, sweet smell of baked sugar. When my mother brought out the cake, the icing, in bright blue varsity-colored script, spelled out, "Congratulations, Evan," there was no mention of my name, no happy birthday. My mother, seeing my face, just smiled, her attention already divided. "Oh, honey," she said. Rushing to the craft drawer, she pulled out a spool of leftover blue ribbon, the exact shade as the icing on Evan's cake. "Here," she said, tying it quickly around my wrist. "Now you match the celebration." I received leftover ribbon. That was my gift. I learned to associate the smell of vanilla cake with the precise, metallic taste of being erased. That was the year I started my habit. At Evan's games, I refused to sit in the front row of the bleachers with my mother, who was living and dying with every single pass. Instead, I would climb to the very top row, high up where the wind was sharp and cold, and I could see the entire field. I did not watch the game. I counted the empty seats. I would count the silver aluminum benches gleaming flatly under the tall Friday night lights. 43 empty spots in Section C, 19 in the visitors section. It became a strange comfort, a ritual. It was my way of measuring the indifference of the world. If there were other empty spots, dozens of them, then my own didn't feel so personal. I was just one of many forgotten appointments. In my history class, there was a poster. It was a laminated, slightly sun-faded print of the oath of allegiance that new citizens take. I do not know why it fascinated me so much. Perhaps it was the absolute formality of it, the gravity. It was a contract, a promise. I copied the words into my spiral notebook, my pen pressing hard against the thin, lined paper. One phrase seemed to jump out from the page, lit up like a lighthouse beacon in the dusty classroom: support and defend. It was an active phrase. It was a job. It was something you do. It was not about being cheered for. It was about being the person who stands up and holds the line. My teachers did not notice me much, not in the way they noticed the loud kids or the truly brilliant ones. My report cards always had the same bland, looping comment: "Delilah is so steady." Steady. It sounded like a compliment, but it was not. Steady means you do not rock the boat. Steady means you do not require maintenance. Steady means you are easy to ignore. I was the reliable, quiet hum of a refrigerator. No one ever notices it until it breaks down. I never broke down. I tried. Once, I joined the debate team. I liked the structure, the rules, the clean, logical idea that you could win an argument simply by organizing your facts better than the other person. I practiced my rebuttals until my throat was raw. I made it to the county finals. And I won. I stood on the small auditorium stage, holding a cheap, gold plastic trophy. But the two seats that had been reserved for my parents were empty. They were stuck at one of Evan's away games, a crucial preseason match 2 hours away. I had to ask a neighbor, who was there for her own daughter, if she would please take a picture. She did. The photo is blurry. The lighting in the auditorium is bad, casting deep shadows. I am slightly out of frame, holding the trophy. It is the only record of my victory. That night, I started a new notebook. It was a small, black-covered ledger, the kind my father used to track his parts. I wrote down the date. I wrote down county debate finals. And beside it, I wrote, Mom and Dad, Evan's game. I learned to document. I quietly wrote down who came, who did not, and the reason they gave. It was not about anger, not really. It was about data. I was just keeping track of the facts. The central metaphor of my family was never clearer than during the holidays. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, our house was packed. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors. My mother would bring out the folding card tables. But she had this one superstition, this rigid tradition. We always had to leave one chair empty at the main table. For an unexpected guest, she would say brightly, adjusting the empty place setting. You always have to have room for one more, but in the 25 years I lived in that house, no one ever sat in it. The unexpected guest never arrived. That chair just sat there, hollow and waiting, a perfect, polished symbol of a generosity that was purely theoretical. It was an obsession. It haunted the room. Standing in the cold marble lobby of the courthouse, with a 12 and a 13 waiting, I thought about that stupid, empty holiday chair. I thought about the blurry photo and the blue ribbon. I made a vow to myself a long time ago. A promise I copied into that same notebook with the oath of allegiance. When I grew up, when I was in charge of my own life, I would have no more symbolic chairs. I would have no more hollow gestures. My empty seats would be filled. If the designated audience failed to show up, I would simply find a new one. At 18, I left Redfield. I moved to Pueblo, Colorado, under the guise of a late family reunification. The family was a distant aunt of my mother's, a woman I had met only twice, who offered me a couch in her living room with the clear, unspoken expectation that I would be neither a burden nor a permanent fixture. I was simply a signature on a form, a legal anchor. I was on my own. My first job was at the Blue Anvil Diner. I was a busser, night shift. My world shrank to the hours between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. That diner was a universe of its own. Specific smells: stale coffee, the sharp tang of industrial cleaning solution, hot grease, and the faint sweetness of day-old pie crusts. My hands were my primary tools. They were always chapped, always raw, always plunged into bins of scalding, soapy water or gripping the heavy, overflowing gray bus tub. The weight of that tub became my clock. When it was full, I would heave it back to the dish pit, my shoulders burning, my breath catching, the sound of clattering ceramic, the scrape of silverware, the murmur of the graveyard shift patrons. It was the soundtrack to my new life. I learned to move fast, to be invisible, to anticipate a finished plate before the fork was even set down. The diner had its regulars, about 100 of them, cops finishing their shift, long-haul truckers, nurses from the nearby hospital. My own private project became memorizing their faces and their habits. The man in booth 4 always left a perfect pyramid of sugar packets. The woman at the counter always folded her napkin into a tiny square. I filed them away, a mental database of strangers. They never spoke to me, but I knew them. They were my first American audience. In the mornings, smelling of bleach and coffee, I would go to a community English class held in the basement of a church. The room was lit by buzzing fluorescent tubes that made everyone look pale and tired. The air was thick with the accents of a dozen different countries, everyone struggling to wrap their mouths around the sharp, unfamiliar sounds of American English. It was there I learned the phrase that would define my new life. The teacher, a patient woman named Mrs. Gable, was explaining attendance. "It is not just about being here," she said, writing on the whiteboard. In America, we have a phrase, to show up. She underlined it. It means more than just arriving. It means you are present. You are reliable. You are here when it counts. To show up is a talent. A talent? I wrote the phrase down in my notebook. To show up? It resonated. Back home, attendance was assumed. Presence was an obligation. But cheering was optional. Here, the simple, reliable act of appearing was considered a skill, a virtue. I decided, in that damp basement, that it would be my primary skill. I needed to practice, to make my voice stronger, to sand down the edges of my accent so I would be understood. So I went to the city library and I volunteered. I offered to reshelve books, a job no one else wanted. It was quiet, solitary work, but it put me in the stacks, surrounded by words, and when I was done, I would go to the Conversational Partners program. I would sit across from kind, retired strangers and read newspaper articles aloud. My face would flush with embarrassment at the mispronunciations, the stumbles, but I did it. I showed up twice a week until the word thoroughly no longer felt like a stone in my mouth. The whole time, my own immigration application was moving through the system. It was a slow, glacial process, a river of paper. I learned the choreography of bureaucracy. I learned to respect the queue, the endless lines at government buildings that snaked around gray corridors. I learned to fill out forms in triplicate, in black ink only, with no crossouts. I learned that my file number was more important than my name. I learned patience, not as a passive, waiting virtue, but as an active, grinding profession. It was a job. You clocked in. You waited. You did not complain. You did not make errors. And you went home. I saved every dollar from the diner. The tips split between a dozen hands, and enrolled at Mesa Ridge Community College. I chose data analysis. It was logical. It was clean. It was the opposite of Redfield's red dust and the diner's grease. It was a world of pure, verifiable facts. My professor, a quiet man named Dr. Hartman, noticed me. I was the one in the back row who always had the answers, but who was still taking notes by hand in a spiral notebook. One day after class, he stopped me. "You cannot process this much data by hand, Ms. Cook," he said, not unkindly. He wheeled out an old, heavy laptop from his office. It was a university cast-off, thick and beige. "You can borrow this, until you can get your own." He did not ask for thanks. He did not make a speech. He just saw a need, and he filled it. He showed up. That laptop changed my schedule. It changed my life. I built a new existence, a brutal, 3-part harmony of survival. My day started at 4 a.m., the morning shift, 5 to 9, at a logistics warehouse on the edge of town. The air inside was freezing, my breath pluming in front of me. My job was scanning and sorting. My hands, now in work gloves, would grow numb as I lifted box after box. It was heavy, mindless, physical work. At 10 a.m., I was at school. I would sit in the library, Dr. Hartman's old laptop humming, my mind shifting from the physical to the abstract. I learned code. I learned statistical models. I learned how to find the signal in the noise. At 6 p.m., my evening classes started. I would sit in the lecture halls, the fluorescent lights buzzing just like in the church basement, and I would absorb. At 11 p.m., my third shift began. I worked from my tiny apartment, the one I now rented, which consisted of a single room with a hot plate. I was a nighttime operator for a customer service call center. I would put on my headset, and my voice would travel across the country, solving problems for angry people in different time zones. I would listen to them yell about broken products and late fees, and I would respond in my calm, practiced, library voice. "I understand your frustration. Let me see how I can help you." I slept for about 3 hours a night. On the front of my small, second-hand refrigerator, I taped a single index card. On it, I had written a sentence I found, "Do the work even if no one claps." I saw it every time I got a glass of water. my eyes gritty with exhaustion. It was my creed. During my shifts at the call center, I started helping other immigrants. I was part of a loose network, a volunteer group that met on weekends in the same church basement. We helped people fill out the endless forms, visa extensions, work permits, the first steps of the green card application. I saw the fear in their eyes, the confusion. I saw how a single misplaced date, a single unchecked box, could send their lives spiraling. I saw the patterns. I was a data analyst. After all, I saw the same mistakes being made over and over. I started to dream of a better system, a free platform that could guide people, that could catch the common errors before they became disasters. I started to build my own system. I used colored sticky notes to track my own procedures. Blue for documents I needed, yellow for common errors and pitfalls, and red, a color I used sparingly, for the mental escape hatches the phone number for a legal aid lawyer, the address of a women's shelter, the bus route to the Canadian border. I was only half kidding about the last one. Finally, the letter came. My interview for permanent residency, my green card. It was scheduled for a Tuesday in January. In Denver, I had to take a bus, a 3-hour ride. I took the day off from all 3 jobs. I wore my navy blue dress. I went alone. That morning, a blizzard shut down half of Colorado. The bus was the only thing moving. It crept along the highway, the world outside the windows a terrifying, swirling vortex of white. The bus slid twice. People were crying. I just sat, my hands clutching my folder of documents, my back rigid. I had calculated my travel time. I had left a 4-hour buffer. Even with the storm, I would not be late. I arrived at the USCIS building, my shoes soaked, my hair frozen. 20 minutes early, I sat in the waiting room. It was vast, and silent, and tense. Everyone there was waiting for a decision that would change their life. I watched a very old woman, her hair in a neat white bun, begin to cry. She was clutching a letter, speaking in rapid, distressed tones I did not recognize. A security guard was trying to talk to her, but she did not understand. She was missing a translation. She was going to miss her appointment. I looked at her, at the panic in her eyes. I did not speak her language, but I knew the system. I walked over to the main desk, my heart pounding. "Excuse me," I said to the officer. "That woman, Section C, row 12. She needs a translator. Can you call the translation service? She is in distress." The officer looked at me, then at the woman. He nodded. He made a call. 10 minutes later, a kind-faced woman with a badge came and sat by the elderly woman. The old woman's face, her entire body, crumpled in relief. She looked over and saw me watching. She put her hands together and she bowed her head to me. I felt a jolt, something electric and sharp. It was the first thank you I had received in years that felt like it weighed something. It was not for holding a rope or clearing a plate. It was for seeing a problem and fixing it, for showing up. I sat back down, my hands trembling slightly. I looked at the American flag in the front of the room, and I understood. This was it. This was the work. I did not belong to a family that cheered. I did not belong to a town that held on to its past. I belonged where I was useful. My green card finally came through, with a plastic card in my wallet that declared I was a lawful permanent resident. I left the diner, the warehouse, and the call center behind. I graduated from Mesa Ridge, top of my class. My data analysis degree felt heavy in my hand, like a tool I had forged myself. I got an internship at Northbridge Analytics, a data firm in downtown Denver. Northbridge was a world of cold glass, brushed steel, and quiet, expensive carpeting. It was the absolute opposite of Redfield. 6 months later, they converted me to a full-time employee. I was assigned to the Compliance Intelligence Division. My job was to sift through mountains of regulatory data to find patterns of failure. I was, essentially, a professional version of the girl who counted empty seats. I found a pattern right away. It was not in our clients. It was in us. Our own internal system for tracking our employees' work visas was a disaster. It was a single, shared spreadsheet. manually updated by 3 different HR assistants who were clearly overwhelmed. We had dozens of engineers, analysts like me, on H-1B, L-1 and O-1 visas. A single typo in that spreadsheet, a single missed deadline, was not just a clerical error, it was a life. It was a plane ticket home. It was deportation. I saw the system, and I saw my red sticky notes. I spent 3 weeks of my own time, working nights, building a solution. I wrote a small, clean, automated module. It was a bot that would integrate with the HR platform, cross-reference visa expiration dates with government processing times, and send encrypted, automated reminders to both the employee and the legal team. 6 months out, 3 months out, 30 days out. I called it Open Seat. A name only I would understand. It was not about an empty chair. It was about opening a chair that was about to be forcibly vacated. I scheduled a meeting with my direct supervisor, Braden Kells. Braden was all expensive tailoring, a faint, citrusy scent of cologne, and an easy practice smile that never, ever reached his cold blue eyes. He leaned back in his high-end ergonomic chair, looked at my demo for about 5 minutes, and steepled his fingers. "Well, that's cute, Delilah," he said. His tone was dismissive, like I had shown him a macaroni art project. "A real passion project. I like the initiative. Good stuff." He said he would take it under advisement and socialize it with the team. 2 days later, I was checking the project management board, the JIRA. I saw it. He had logged the project, and in the originator field, he had typed his own name. He had changed the author. The next week, he presented it at the all-hands internal demo. He used my exact presentation slides, my user interface. He stood on the small stage, his voice smooth and confident, explaining the architecture. He never mentioned my name. The chief technology officer, a woman I genuinely respected, was in the front row. She was beaming. "Braden, this is brilliant," she said during the Q&A. "This is exactly the kind of humanitarian-focused, internal-first tech we need to be championing. A fantastic idea." My stomach felt like it was full of cold, wet cement. That afternoon, I sent a polite, careful email. I sent it to Braden, and I CC'd our HR business partner. I attached my original proposal, my initial code repository commits, and the presentation draft I had sent him. "Hi, Braden," I wrote. "I was so glad to see the positive reception for Open Seat today. I seem to be missing from the credits on the JIRA ticket. Just wanted to gently clarify my role as the originator and sole developer for the prototype. Happy to discuss." The reply did not come from Braden. It came from HR. Less than an hour later, it was a generic, canned response. "Dear Delilah, at Northbridge, we value a team effort above all. We are glad you were able to contribute to Braden's successful initiative." A team effort. I closed the email. I looked at the blurred, gray reflection of myself in the dark monitor. I was the blurry girl in the trophy photo all over again. That night, I went home and I pulled out my copy of the Northbridge Employee Handbook. I read it cover to cover. I found the section I was looking for. Section 9. Subparagraph 4. All meetings, while confidential to the company, are considered on the record. Recording of meetings for the purposes of note-taking and accuracy is permitted. I bought a new digital voice recorder, and I started my ledger again. I logged everything. I was no longer just a data analyst. I was a data archivist, my own archivist. I exported my entire commit history from the code repository, complete with timestamps. I took screenshots of the original JIRA ticket and the one Braden had altered, and I started recording my meetings. I would walk in, place my phone and the small recorder on the table between us. "You mind?" I would say. "It is just for my notes." I typed too slow. Braden would just laugh. "Whatever you need," he would say. He was too arrogant to be suspicious. He was too busy talking, too busy explaining how he was going to expand his project. He was sloppy, and he thought I was stupid. He thought I was just the quiet, steady girl from HR's team effort email. He thought I was just grateful to be in the building. He was wrong. One Thursday, I was working late, running diagnostics. It was after 10 p.m. The entire floor was dark and silent, just the hum of the servers and the clicking of my keyboard. I was running a query, looking for external vendor overlaps in our compliance logs. And I saw a flag. Braden. He was exchanging files with a vendor we did not have an active contract with, a small, unknown consulting firm. My pulse quickened. This was not part of the project. I dug. I used my admin privileges to look into the shared server archives. The air in the office felt 20 degrees colder. I found the emails. He was not just stealing my idea for internal glory, he was selling it. He had packaged the entire Open Seat module as a new enterprise compliance suite. He was in the final stages of selling it to this outside vendor, who would then rebrand it and sell it to our own competitors. And then I found the contract draft and the wire transfer details. It was a side deal, a consulting fee for 20% of the sale, paid directly to a private LLC. I ran a search on the LLC. It was registered to Braden's home address. He was not just stealing my work, he was committing fraud. He was getting a personal kickback. I did not go home. I sat there, in the dark, and I wrote. I compiled a 12-page report. It was not emotional. It was cold, factual, and analytical. It was the best data work I have ever done. Page 1. The executive summary. Page 2. My original proposal. Page 3. The time-stamped code commits. Page 4. The screenshots of the altered JIRA ticket. Page 5. The transcript of the audio recording where he explicitly said, "My idea is to expand." Pages 6 through 10. The email chains, the server logs, the discovery of the external vendor. Page 11. The contract draft. Page 12. The LLC registration and the wire transfer instructions for his kickback. I encrypted the entire file. I set the password. The password was the date of my upcoming naturalization ceremony. I opened my email. I addressed it to the anonymous, confidential ethics inbox listed in the company handbook. I attached the single, encrypted file. I did not write a subject line. I hit send. The next morning, I arrived at 8:55 a.m. I got my coffee. I sat at my desk. At 9:15, an urgent meeting request from Braden popped up in my calendar. Quick sync. I walked into the small, glass-walled conference room. He was already there, pacing, holding his phone. That easy smile was firmly in place, but his eyes were moving too fast. "Delilah, great news," he started. He did not even sit down. "The Open Seat project has gotten so much traction. It is being fast-tracked. We are moving it up to the enterprise level. It is going to be a huge win." I waited. I said nothing. "Because of that," he continued, the words coming faster, "we are going to need to do some restructuring. We are bringing in a senior architecture team to take this thing to the next level, which means, unfortunately, your role on this particular project will be phased out. We need you to get back to focusing on your core compliance duties." He was cutting me out. He was erasing me. Right after he had sold me, I smiled. It was a small, tight smile. The kind of smile a person gets when they have just finished a very, very long and difficult calculation, and the answer is precisely, exactly, what they predicted. "That's fine. Braden," I said. My voice was perfectly calm. "That restructure makes sense. But in that case, I will need to formally request some paid time off. I am requesting all of next Tuesday." He visibly relaxed. He thought I was defeated. Shuffling off to count my spreadsheets. "Oh, yeah, sure, of course. Taking a long weekend." "No," I said, standing up. I gathered my notebook. "It is for my citizenship ceremony." "Oh, right? Great. Well, congratulations. Absolutely. Just put the request in the system." He nodded, already dismissing me, his eyes back on his phone. He had no idea that I had already put the request in the system. I had sent it 5 minutes before our meeting. I had sent it to him and to HR, and I had blind copied the company's general counsel. The storm was building. The ethics office had my encrypted 12-page bomb. The legal department had my name and my ceremony date, and Braden thought he had just won. He thought I was just the steady girl, the quiet girl, the blurry girl. I had done the work. I had the data. The drums were beating, loud and fast, but I was not going to let this battle happen in a small conference room. I was saving it for a much, much bigger stage. I zipped the whole thing up, put it in my pocket, and walked back to my desk to wait. The morning of the ceremony, I left the apartment before the sun had fully committed to the sky. The city was quiet, the air thin and sharp. I had one stop to make. I walked 3 blocks to a small flower shop called Maple and Coal. It was a name that always felt like Redfield, a mix of softness and industry. The bell above the door chimed, a small, clear sound in the warm, humid air inside. The shop smelled of damp earth, cut stems, and something sweet and spicy, like cinnamon. "Just picking up?" the owner asked, not looking up from a cascade of eucalyptus. "No," I said. "I need something small, but specific." My eyes landed on them. White peonies. They were tightly furled, like fists of cream-colored silk, each one promising an explosion of fragile layers. They felt formal. They felt final. "Just 2, I said. The owner nodded, her hands gentle as she selected 2 perfect, heavy-headed blooms. "For ye ceremony," I said. "Ah," she understood. She pulled a length of ribbon, and I stopped her hand. Could I have that one?" I pointed to a spool of deep, dark red ribbon. It was not satin, but a thick, matte grosgrain. A ribbon with weight and texture. It was the color of the ribbon on my wrist, the color of a declaration. "Of course," she said. She wrapped the stems and tied a single, perfect bow. There were small, cream-colored cards on the counter, next to a pen. I picked 2 of them up. My printed tags from the morning, the ones I'd made in my apartment, suddenly felt cheap, impersonal. This was the last time. It had to be done right. My handwriting was steady, practice from years of note-taking, of filling out forms in black ink only. I wrote the names with a cleanness that felt like a surgical stitch, an attempt to close a wound. Mom Cook, Dad Cook. I tucked the 2 small cards into the ribbon, facing out. I paid, the bills feeling strange and light in my hand. I held the 2 flowers as I walked out, the bell chiming my exit. I was standing on the street corner, 2 blocks from the courthouse, holding the flowers. When my phone buzzed, I knew. Before I even looked, it was a vibration I had felt in my bones my whole life. It was the vibration of the inevitable. The text was from my mother. It was punctual. It was polite. "Evan needs to test drive the car today. We have to be there. So sorry. Honey, we'll celebrate this weekend. I promise." I read the words. I read them 3 times. I waited for the familiar, cold feeling. The familiar sting behind the eyes. The metallic taste of disappointment. The hollow in my stomach. It did not come. Instead, a different feeling rose up. Something I had never, ever felt before in connection with my family. It was a profound, sudden, and shocking lightness. It was the feeling of a 50-pound pack, one I had been carrying for so long I had forgotten it was there. Suddenly being cut from my shoulders, it was the feeling of a heavy, steel-plated suit of armor I had been living inside, a suit I had built myself. Finally unbuckling, the breastplate just fell. It clattered to the pavement with a sound only I could hear. I was free. They were not coming. The vague, agonizing hope. The "what if this time they actually do?" which was a poison I had been drinking my whole life. It was gone. I had the data. The uncertainty was resolved. My thumbs moved. I typed back 2 words. "It's okay." And for the first time in my life, it was not a lie. I looked at the 2 white peonies in my hand. I looked at the 2 beautiful, handwritten cards. Mom Cook, Dad Cook. I had bought them for ghosts. I walked to a public trash can. I untied the red ribbon. I let it fall into my coat pocket. I laid the 2 handwritten cards on top of a discarded newspaper. Then, I placed the 2 white peonies, with their wrapped stems, on top of the cards. A small, formal burial. I reached into my bag and pulled out the red envelope. Inside were the two official guest tickets, A12, A13. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small, spare flag pin. I put it in my pocket. Next to the ribbon, it was a ritual for a different audience. I walked the remaining 2 blocks. When I got to the courthouse, I did not go inside. I stopped on the wide, granite steps. I looked at the stone. It was worn, slightly dished in the middle, polished smooth by the feet of hundreds of thousands of people. People who had come from everywhere, carrying their own stories, their own suitcases, their own invisible armor. They had all walked up these stairs to get what I was about to get. I did not want to join the line, not yet. I had a new job. I was no longer a petitioner. I was a benefactor. I stood to the side, near a large pillar, and I watched. I was looking for the people who needed a seat, not just a place to sit, but a place. I saw her first. She was in her late 50s, maybe early 60s, with a beautiful, thick mane of salt and pepper hair. She was holding a large, slightly wilted bouquet of deep purple irises, clutching them like a shield. She looked like a professor, or a librarian. She was arguing, politely, but with a growing desperation, with a security guard at the guest entrance. "But I am here for Ruth Halverson," she was saying. I'm her replacement teacher. She's my friend. She's inside, getting her citizenship. She asked me to come. I got stuck in traffic. The class. Please, I just want to see her." The guard was unmoved. He had his script. "Ma'am, I am sorry. The guest list is final. We are at capacity. We cannot let you in without a guest pass." Her face crumpled. It was a quiet, dignified collapse. The irises in her hands trembled. She was locked out. Then I saw him. He was a rideshare driver. He was still in his uniform, a dark polo shirt with a company logo. He had just dropped off a large, boisterous family who were now halfway up the steps, laughing and waving flags. But he had not driven away. He had parked his car, a black sedan, and was standing near the curb. He was holding his phone, not at himself, but aimed at the grand facade of the courthouse. He was filming a video and talking in a low, gentle voice. He had a rich, beautiful Nigerian accent. I moved closer. I could just hear him. "And this is it. Tunde," he was murmuring to his phone. "This is the building where it happens. This is where they make you an American. One day. Son, one day." He was not there for anyone. He was there for the idea of it. He was there, standing on the cold sidewalk, to capture a 5-second video of a building to send to his son. A video filled with more longing and respect for what was happening inside than my own family could ever muster. I looked at the woman with the dying flowers. I looked at the man filming a dream. I had my audience. I walked down the steps. I approached them. They both looked at me, startled. A woman in a navy blue dress, holding a red envelope. "Excuse me," I said. My voice was clear. It did not shake. They both just looked at me. "I have 2 seats," I said, holding up the envelope. "A 12 and a 13. My guests were not able to come." I looked at the woman. "Are you Ruth?" She looked confused. "No, I'm here for Ruth. I'm her friend." "Close enough," I said. I looked at the man. He had lowered his phone, his eyes wide. "It's late, I know," I said, my voice gentle. "But you can still make it, if you come with me." The woman, whose name I would learn was also Ruth Halverson, put her hand to her chest. "But we can't. We aren't." "You are now," I said. I ripped open the red envelope and pulled out the 2 tickets. I handed one to her. I handed the other to the man. He looked at the ticket in his hand like it was a burning coal. "I cannot," he said, his voice thick. "I am working. This is more important," I said. "This is Ibrahim, right?" I had read the name tag on his shirt. Ibo. He nodded, stunned. "Ibo, your son needs to see this. You need to tell him you were inside." I smiled. It was not the tight, anxious smile I'd given my parents. It was not the cold, corporate smile I gave Braden. It was a real one. I felt it start in my chest. Today, I said, looking at both of them, everyone needs a witness. Everyone needs someone who knows how to show up. Ruth Halverson started to cry, silent tears running down her face. Ibo Adeyemi just stared at the ticket, then at me, and then he slowly, reverently, slipped it into his pocket. "Come on," I said. "We're going to be late." And the three of us, a new and strange and perfect little family, turned and walked up the worn granite steps together, leaving the cold, empty sidewalk behind. The auditorium was vast, but it felt intimate. We were a sea of over 200 faces, all of us looking forward, all of us having arrived here through our own private storms. The presiding officer, a federal judge with a kind face, said, "You come from 37 nations, but today, you are one people. You are Americans." When the time came, we were asked to rise. A man to my left, from El Salvador, was visibly shaking. A woman in front of me, in a beautiful bright yellow headscarf, was already crying. I raised my right hand. The air felt charged, thick with held breaths, with thousands of hours of waiting, of studying, of working 3 jobs and filling out forms in triplicate. The words of the oath began, and we repeated them. It was not a single voice, it was a chorus, over 200 voices, with the accents of 37 nations, all weaving together into one, solid sound. We were a promise, spoken aloud. I spoke the words, and I meant every one of them, that I will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States. But I was not looking at the flag. I was looking down at the front row, at seats A12 and A13. Ibo Adeyemi was not sitting back. He was perched on the edge of his seat, his phone held perfectly, steadily, in both hands. He was a man documenting a miracle. He was not just recording for his son, he was recording with a focused reverence, as if the video itself could transmit the feeling of the room, the weight of the words. He was capturing the proof. Beside him, Ruth Halverson, the substitute teacher, had her hand pressed to her heart. She was holding the small, spare flag pin I had fished out of my pocket and given her in the hallway. She was clutching it like a talisman. Tears were streaming down her face, slow and silent. She was crying for her friend, the other Ruth, who was somewhere behind me in the crowd, saying the same oath. She was crying, I think, just for the sheer, unexpected grace of being in the room. They were not my family, but they were my witnesses. They were present, body and soul. The oath ended. "So help me God." The room exploded in applause and cheers and sobs. We were citizens. The judge quieted the room. "We usually have a keynote speaker," she said, smiling. "But today, we find the most powerful words often come from you. We have a tradition of inviting 1 or 2 new citizens to share their thoughts. Our team reviews the applications, and one, in particular, stood out for her extensive community volunteer work. Ms. Delilah Cook. My name echoed in the vast room. I froze. My heart, which had been so steady, suddenly felt like a trapped bird. Ibo and Ruth both turned, their faces masks of stunned surprise. Ibo lowered his camera. Ruth grabbed his arm. A staffer was gesturing to me, pointing to the small podium on the stage. I walked. My legs felt unsteady, like the first time I'd stepped off the bus in Pueblo. I climbed the 2 steps. The judge shook my hand. I stood at the microphone. I looked out at the 200 faces, at the 37 nations, all looking back at me, and I saw them. Row 1, a 12, and a 13. My audience. I took a breath. I knew exactly what to say. "My name is Delilah Cook," I said. My voice came out, and it did not shake. It was clear. "When I was a little girl, I used to count empty seats. It was a habit. I thought it meant that people were missing. that I was missing. I looked at Ruth, who was nodding, her tears still flowing. I looked at Ebo, who had raised his phone again, but this time it was aimed right at me. But today, I said, I learned something. I learned that an empty seat is not a loss. It is an opportunity. It is a space you can give to someone else. Seats do not fill themselves. I paused. The room was utterly silent. People fill them, I said, my voice ringing with a new, hard-won clarity. People fill them by showing up, by being present, by understanding that just being there, for yourself, and for a stranger, is the most important work there is. We just took an oath to support and defend. That is not a passive thing. It is a verb. It is a job. It is the act of showing up. Thank you. I stepped back. The room, for a second, was still, and then it erupted. The applause was a physical force, a wave of sound that hit me in the chest. People were standing. I saw the flash of a bright light, the large lens of a professional news camera on a tripod in the aisle. Panning from my face to the front row, it zoomed in, capturing the perfect shot. Ruth Halverson, weeping with her flag pin, and Ebo Adeyemi, standing and applauding, his face split in a wide, proud grin, his phone held high. After the ceremony, after I had my certificate, my hands shaking as I held the crisp, embossed paper, I found them in the lobby. They were waiting for me, right by the door, like family. Ruth was speechless. She just lunged forward and hugged me, hard, crushing her wilting irises between us. That was for my friend Ruth, too. I was late. You see, a class ran late. I'm a substitute teacher, and they would not let me in to see her. They had no ticket for me. No one. No one saved me a spot. But you did, she said, pulling back, her eyes searching mine. You saved me a spot. I did not even know, Ebo said, his voice thick with emotion. He was shaking my hand, his grip like warm steel. I have a 12-hour shift today. I am driving for 12 hours, but I told my supervisor, I must pull over. I must stop. I only wanted to come and hear the words, to see the building, to tell my son Tunde what it felt as a witness, before it is my turn, and you put me in the front row. Will you take a picture with me? I asked, pulling out my phone. I need to document this. The two of you. We huddled together, me, in my navy blue dress, holding my certificate, Ruth, her salt and pepper hair a mess, her face red from crying, clutching her flowers, Ebo, his shoulders back, his smile radiating a light that felt brighter than the sun. I snapped the photo. It was not blurry. It was not out of frame. It was perfect. I posted it on my small, private social media account. I typed one thing, one hashtag, seat for who shows up. We were interrupted. A young woman, holding a microphone with a Channel 7 logo, approached us, a cameraman right behind her. Delilah Cook, she asked. That was an incredible speech. Just beautiful. We got a great shot of your two guests here. Can you tell us? Why them? We checked the manifest. Seats A12 and A13 were registered to a mom and dad Cook, but they were empty. She held the microphone up to my face. The bright, invasive light of the camera clicked on. This was the moment. This was the question. I felt the last, tiny, brittle piece of the girl who counted seats, the girl who accepted leftover ribbons, just turned to dust inside me. I looked straight into the camera lens. I did not smile. My voice was calm, clear, and final. They were not empty, I said. They were given to two people who did show up. The reporter's eyes widened. She had her soundbite. By the time I got home, my phone was exploding. The clip, it turned out, was the lead-in to the 5 o'clock news. The perfect, heartwarming local story. A tight shot of me saying, they were not empty, followed by the shot of Ruth crying and Ebo applauding, with a graphic overlaid on the screen, seats for those who show up. It was all over the Denver social media sphere. My photo with Ruth and Ebo was being shared. People were borrowing the phrase for their own posts, for their own community meetings. And then, amid the flood of congratulations from acquaintances, the text I had been waiting for my entire life finally came, from my mother. "You went on television and embarrassed us. You made us look like bad parents." I read the text. I felt nothing, not anger, not sadness, just a quiet, diagnostic click. The data was in. The pattern was confirmed. I opened the message thread. I scrolled up, seeing the years of excuses, the Evans games, the sorry honey. I tapped the info button. I muted the notifications. I did not block them. I just turned the volume off. I sat in my quiet apartment, the certificate of naturalization on my coffee table. I picked up my phone again and sent a new text. A group message to 2 new numbers. Ruth, Ebo, coffee tomorrow. My treat? I owe you both a debt. Ebo replied almost instantly. I am there, Ruth replied a minute later. I'll bring my friend Ruth, the new Ruth. You'll love her. I smiled. I typed one more time. I owe you. You were the first to witness me become me. The day I returned to work, the office felt different. The air was buzzing. My viral clip, my seats for those who show up speech, had not gone unnoticed. Northbridge Analytics, in a stunning display of corporate judo, immediately tried to absorb the narrative. An internal PR email landed in everyone's inbox before 9 a.m. Celebrating our newest citizen. The subject line was bright and cheerful. It featured a grainy screenshot of me from the news, but the text was all about Northbridge. We are proud of our own Delilah Cook. Northbridge fosters a culture of civic engagement, our diverse immigrant workforce. It was a masterpiece of co-option. It was Braden Kells, however, who delivered the punchline. He appeared at my desk, not with anger, but with that same terrifyingly broad, citrus-scented smile. He was holding 2 cups of coffee. Delilah, our local celebrity, he boomed, loud enough for the whole open-plan office to hear. He placed a coffee on my desk. I did not touch it. Listen, that was just incredible. We're all so proud of you. So proud. In fact, we want to give you a bigger stage. I just looked at him. My face was a placid, calm, data entry mask. The quarterly town hall is next week, he said, leaning against my cubicle wall. All casual confidence. The CEO will be there. I'm presenting the Q1 successes, and I want to feature you, as a key member of my team, talking about your journey. That whole showing up thing, it'll be fantastic for our brand. He wanted to parade me on stage, under his banner, to wrap his stolen project in my borrowed patriotism. He was going to use my citizenship to sell his fraud. I swiveled my chair to face him. I gave him the polite, steady voice I'd practiced in the library. Thank you. Braden, that's a very generous offer. I would be happy to speak, but I would only feel comfortable if I can speak about my full contribution to the company. That would, of course, include a detailed presentation of my work originating the open seat module. His smile did not falter, but it tightened at the edges. The color rose in his neck, a faint, blotchy red. Delilah, he said, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur. We've been over this. That was a team effort. This town hall is about inspiration. It's about culture. Let's not get bogged down in technical details. The technical details are my work, I replied, my voice still perfectly, evenly, quiet. I will not be speaking unless my work is properly credited. The smile vanished. It did not fade. It was an eclipse. His eyes went flat and cold. You are not being a team player, Delilah. He hissed. This is a huge opportunity for you, and this is not a good culture fit. This is not how we do things here. It's how I do things, I said. He stared at me for another second, his mind clearly racing, recalculating. Then he turned on his heel and walked away. 10 minutes later, the email from HR arrived. Subject: a quick chat, my new family. However, was already in motion. I had met Ruth and Ebo for that coffee. We had talked for 3 hours, and when I told them about Braden, their reactions were not surprise. They were action. Ruth Halverson, my witness, the substitute teacher, had smiled. A culture fit problem. Dear, that's what they always say. She took a sip of her tea. You know, my younger sister, Mary, she's a deputy director at the state labor office. She finds companies that misclassify employees and steal wages. Fascinating. She always told me, Ruth, the evidence is everything. She told me to tell you to save everything, which, it sounds like, you've already done. Ibo Adeyemi, my other witness, had leaned in, his face serious. Delilah, this man, Braden, he is not just a thief. He is a fool. He does not know who he is dealing with. My oldest friend from Lagos. We came to this country together. He works at the Front Range Ledger. He is an investigative reporter. He hates tech company executives who exploit immigrant workers. They were my new network, a state employee and a reporter. My first call was not to them. It was to the pro bono legal aid service I used to volunteer for. I got an appointment with an employment lawyer, a sharp, tired woman who worked for an NGO. I walked into her office, a cramped room full of binders. I did not give her my 12-page report. I gave her something else. I am not his only victim, am I? The lawyer asked, after I explained. I don't think so, I said. Good. She took the USB drive I offered her. What's on this? My complete time-stamped log, I said. Every code commit, hashed with an SHA-256 algorithm, every email, every original draft, the audio files, and the 12-page report. It's all there. She nodded. You're a data analyst. All right, I'll keep this. Do not speak to HR without me. The quick chat with HR was a masterpiece of gaslighting. It was me and 2 HR managers, in a room with no windows. They were concerned. They felt I was not integrating. They wanted to find a path forward. They asked leading questions. Don't you feel Braden has been a supportive manager? Doesn't it feel good to be part of a successful team initiative? I gave them nothing. I was the steady girl from Redfield. I was polite. I was vague. I was a blank, pleasant wall. I was a refrigerator, humming quietly, not breaking down. I was just there for my notes. The day of the town hall arrived. I had not been fired, but I had been officially, quietly, retasked to a different, dead-end data cleaning project. The auditorium was packed. The CEO gave a speech about synergy and our Northbridge family. Then, he introduced Braden Kells. Braden walked onto the stage, brimming with confidence. He was in his element. He clicked to his main slide. Q1 successes, the Open Seat Initiative. My blood ran cold. He was not just mentioning it. He was leading with it. This, he said, pacing the stage, was a personal passion project, a leadership initiative I developed from the ground up. He spoke about his humanitarian-focused vision. He showed my UI, my architecture diagrams. I sat in the back row. I listened. I documented. I let him finish. I let him bask in the applause. Then, the CEO stepped up. Great work, Braden, a true leader. Now, we have time for a few questions from the audience. A hand shot up in the back, mine. The CEO squinted. Yes, Delilah, our new celebrity. A question. I stood up. I did not need the microphone runner. My voice, my library-practiced, call center-strengthened voice, was loud enough. Yes, thank you, I said. I looked directly at Braden, who was still on stage, his smile frozen. This is a question for Braden, I said, my voice ringing with an absolute, cold calm. I am so fascinated by the ground-up development of OpenSeat. Could you elaborate on the significance of the initial code commit, time-stamped on October 17th at 2:31 a.m., or the architectural draft, time-stamped October 19th, or the final prototype, submitted on October 22nd, all from my repository? A ripple went through the auditorium, a collective, Sharp intake of breath. People were turning, staring. Braden's face went white. The blotchy red was back, but this time it was his whole face. He stammered, I, that was foundational work, part of the team. I did not let him finish. I was not finished. I have one more question, I said, turning my gaze to the CEO. My parents were given 2 seats to my citizenship ceremony, seats a 12 and a 13. They did not show up. Braden, you were given lead authorship on a project you did not create. My question is for the entire company. How long will we keep reserving our best seats, our most important credits, for people who do not do the work and who do not show up? The silence that followed was deafening. The CEO, a man who did not get to his position by being slow, stepped forward. His face was thunderous. He spoke into the microphone. Thank you, Delilah. That is a very serious line of inquiry. He looked at Braden, who looked like he was about to be sick. I am ordering an immediate internal review of the open seat project, effective immediately. I sat down. My heart was pounding, a drum solo in my chest. I did not have to wait long. I was back at my desk for less than an hour, pretending to clean data. I saw Braden march back to his office. He was on the phone, yelling. I watched. On my second monitor, the repository access log. At 3:02 p.m., Braden Kells attempted to revoke D. Cook from the open seat repository. At 3:02 p.m., the attempt was denied. At 3:03 p.m., Braden Kells attempted to delete the repository. At 3:03 p.m., the attempt was denied. My own email pinged. It was not from HR. It was a system-wide, automated email sent to me, to Braden, and to the entire executive team. From Ethics Office, do not reply. Subject litigation hold. Project open seat. A formal complaint has been received and opened. All data, repositories, email, and chat logs related to Project Open Seat are now under a legal hold. Do not delete or alter any data. All access controls are now frozen by the Office of the General Counsel. Braden was trapped. He had been so busy trying to erase me. He had not realized I was not a person. I was a data log, and I had the receipts. The town hall was an explosion. The legal hold was the aftershock, but the earthquake hit 2 days later. On the front page of the Front Range Ledger's digital edition, Ebo's friend had worked fast. The headline was not subtle. Who really owns Open Seat? The article was a masterpiece of journalistic precision. It detailed my Seats for Those Who Show Up speech. It interviewed anonymous tech workers about the rampant credit stealing in corporate culture. It then pivoted, asking hard questions about a project called Open Seat at Northbridge Analytics. It mentioned an unnamed immigrant data analyst who had presented her work, only to have it allegedly co-opted by her manager, Braden Kells. But the reporter did not stop there. He had dug into public records. He had found the LLC registered to Braden's address. He had found the small, unknown vendor. The article ended with a single, devastating question: is Northbridge Analytics fostering innovation, or are its managers using company resources to secure private kickbacks? The word kickback was now in public print. All hell broke loose. I was summoned to an emergency meeting, not in an HR office, but in the executive boardroom on the 40th floor. The CEO was there, the general counsel, the head of PR. Braden was not. The CEO, the man who had looked so thunderous at the town hall, was now all smooth concern. He offered me coffee. He offered me a seat. He offered me a new title. Delilah, he said, this is a terrible misunderstanding, a breakdown in communication. Braden. He has been a poor manager. We see that now. The head of PR chimed in. We want to make this right. The optics are challenging, but this is an internal matter. We are prepared to offer you an immediate promotion, senior data architect, a 20% raise, and of course, you will be the new public-facing lead on the Open Seat project. We just need to put this unfortunate External noise to rest. They were offering me a promotion. They were offering me hush money. They wanted me to smile, take the title, and help them sweep Braden's fraud under the rug, all while they quietly dealt with him later. I looked at the three powerful, expensive, nervous faces. I thought of the blurry trophy photo. I thought of the leftover ribbon. "No," I said. The CEO's smile twitched. "I'm sorry. No. Thank you. I am not interested in a promotion. I am interested in a correction." I placed my hands on the polished mahogany table. "Here is my offer. 1. You will issue a public correction, naming me as the sole originator of Open Seat. 2. Braden Kells is to be terminated for cause, immediately. And 3. The Open Seat module will be removed from all internal and external sales consideration. It will be open-sourced, with a permanent, free-use license for all nonprofit NGOs assisting immigrants." The general counsel's jaw literally dropped. "Ms. Cook, Delilah, that is not how this works. That is proprietary company property. We can't just give it away." "You can't," I agreed. "But I can. And since I am the only person on Earth who can fix the public relations disaster your reporter friend is currently creating, this is the price." The CEO's face hardened. "You are overplaying your hand, Ms. Cook." "Am I?" I said, right on cue, as if I had written it into a script. The general counsel's phone buzzed violently on the table. He looked at it. His face went from pale to ashen. "I need to take this," he stammered, standing and walking to the far glass wall. He did not know that. An hour earlier, Ruth Halverson, my witness, had been on a three-way call. It was her, me, and her sister, Mary, the deputy director at the state labor office. We were not talking about my credit. We were talking about the vendor, the one Braden was selling my code to. Ruth's sister had found something. That vendor was a subcontractor for the state, and they had a long, documented history of misclassifying and underpaying immigrant guest workers. The general counsel was now staring at a multi-front war, a public fraud accusation, an internal authorship rebellion, and now a state-level labor investigation. And I still had one more piece of evidence. Ibo Adeyemi's contribution was not just the introduction to a reporter. He was a rideshare driver. He spent his life watching, documenting, and remembering. His dashcam was always on. He had checked his logs. He had driven to Northbridge dozens of times. He remembered Braden, and he had a video. It was a quiet, grainy video from the parking garage. Taken 3 weeks ago, it was time-stamped. It showed Braden Kells getting out of his polished Audi. It showed him meeting the CEO of the shell vendor. It showed Braden handing him a Northbridge-branded USB drive. It showed the vendor handing Braden a thick white envelope. It was a consulting fee, paid in cash, in a parking garage. The internal legal team, which had received my 12-page report and had just cross-referenced it with the Ledger article, had come to a very fast, very clean conclusion. The company's risk of litigation was now astronomical. Braden Kells was not a manager. He was a walking violation of the no self-dealing policy, not to mention multiple federal statutes. The CEO came to my desk an hour later. The swagger was gone. "My office," he said. "Let's negotiate." This time, I was the one who set the terms. I had a presentation ready. It was not my 12-page report. That was the weapon. This was the peace treaty. "This is the Open Seat Foundation," I said, putting the first slide on his monitor. "You are going to fund it, not as a project, but as an independent, non-profit entity. Northbridge will provide all the seed funding for 2 years. I will be the executive director. We will take the Open Seat module, and we will not just open source it. We will build a national, free platform." "And in exchange?" he asked, his voice flat. "In exchange, I sign a full non-disclosure agreement about the details of Braden's fraud. The company's press release will state that you discovered the violation, you terminated him for cause, and as part of your commitment to ethics, you are funding this new initiative, which you are gifting to the public, authored by me." He was quiet. He was a businessman. He saw the out. It was a brilliant, elegant, and very, very expensive solution for him. And I added, "You will issue a public apology to me, by name, for the oversight in authorship." He nodded slowly. "I can agree to the funding. I can agree to the termination and the statement. I can even agree to the apology." It was at that exact moment my cell phone rang. I looked at the screen. "Mom," I let it ring. The CEO raised an eyebrow. "Take it. We're almost done here." I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Delilah." My mother's voice was frantic, the high, thin sound of her public panic. "What are you doing? Your father and I. We just saw an article. It says you're attacking your company, your manager. Delilah, this is the man who gave you a job, who promoted you." I stopped. I had to. The absurdity of it was a physical blow. "Mom, he didn't promote me. He stole my work and then tried to sell it." "But to put it on the news," she cried. "You are ruining him. You are destroying the people who tried to lift you up. Why are you always so difficult?" I stood there, the cold glass of the 40th floor window at my back, looking down at the entire city of Denver. I saw the courthouse, a small gray block in the distance. "He never lifted me up, Mom," I said. My voice was calm, almost detached. "He never even showed up. He tried to take my seat, and I am not letting him." I hung up. I did not wait for a reply. I walked back into the CEO's office. "One last thing," he said. "The foundation. We'll fund it. But Northbridge will retain a controlling interest in the board of directors, for oversight." He was still trying to win. He was still trying to keep his hand on the wheel. I thought about the last 10 years, the diner, the warehouse, the call center, the blizzard, the blurry photo, the empty holiday chair. "No," I said. "I beg your pardon. No, this is not a negotiation. You will fund it. It will be independent. I will control the board. Or," I said, picking up my bag, "I can walk out of this office, and my lawyer, my new friends at the Ledger, and my other new friends at the State Labor Office can continue this conversation in a federal court." I walked to the door. My hand was on the handle. "Wait," he said. I turned. He looked exhausted. He looked beaten. He looked like a man who had finally run the data and seen the inevitable result. "Fine," he said. "Draft the agreement." That afternoon, I released a public statement of my own, forwarded to the Ledger. It contained none of the damaging information. It was just a 2-page summary of the community benefits of the open seat module. It was a data-driven analysis of how many thousands of immigrant hours could be saved, how many lives could be stabilized. The internet, which had been primed for outrage, now had a cause to champion. The support was overwhelming. Northbridge investors, seeing the public wave, released their own statement, urging full transparency and a swift, ethical resolution. The company had no choice. They were trapped, not by my anger, but by their own greed and my unassailable data. The next day, the official press release went out. Northbridge Analytics announces termination of Braden Kells for ethics violations, commits $2 million to new open chair initiative. It was done. The press release, in paragraph 3, contained the apology. It acknowledged me, Delilah Cook, as the sole creator and author, and it announced my new title, not as an employee, but as the founder of a new organization. I had renamed it. It was not just about opening a seat. It was about dedicating it. It was the Open Chair Initiative, and I was in charge. The battle was over. The ceasefire had been signed in the form of a press release and a $2 million wire transfer. The adrenaline that had been my fuel for weeks, the righteous, crystalline anger of the town hall, the cold precision of the boardroom negotiation was gone. In its place was a profound, humming quiet, a quiet so vast it felt like the first day of my life. I was in my apartment. It was small, but it was mine. I had bought 4 new matching dining chairs, a painful expense, but a necessary one. I had 3 in storage. Tonight, I needed all 4. I invited them for dinner. My mother, my father, and Evan. They arrived at 6 p.m., exactly on time, as if to prove, nervously, that they could. They brought a bottle of cheap, sweet white wine. My mother tried to hug me at the door, a stiff, awkward gesture that I did not return, but did not pull away from. I just stood there, steady, until she let go. My father, Miguel, just nodded, his eyes scanning the room, uncomfortable, out of his element. Evan, my brother, now a young man I barely knew, just looked at his feet. We sat at my small table. The sound of my fork on the ceramic plate was loud. The silence was thick, heavy, and full of all the things we were not saying. It was full of the citizenship ceremony, the television news clip, the frantic phone call. My mother, Joanne, was trying. Her voice was bright, brittle, and false. "This is a lovely apartment, Delilah. So clean, and this chicken is wonderful. Is this Rosemary?" "It is," I said. My father said nothing. He just ate, his movements economical and precise, the way a mechanic eats. Evan said nothing. My mother's gaze was darting around the small room, desperate for a topic, for something to land on. Her eyes found the small, simple piece of wood I had hung by the doorway. I had painted it myself, in the same navy blue as my ceremony dress. The lettering was white, in the same font as the Northbridge press release. It said, "For those who show up." My mother's breath hitched. She looked at the sign, and then at me. Her face, for a second, was not angry or defensive. It was just sad. She understood. It was a house rule. It was my new constitution. It was my father who finally broke the real silence. He had not looked at the sign. He was looking at his plate. "I always figured," he said, his voice a low rumble, rough like the red dust of Redfield. "I always figured you were strong enough to not need us. You were the self-reliant one. You were the one who never asked for anything." It was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. It was not an apology. It was a confession, a bitter, painful admission of his entire philosophy, the one that had left me standing alone on stages my entire life. I put my fork down. I looked at him, at his chapped hands, the hands that could fix any engine but had never known how to clap for me. "Being strong doesn't mean I needed to be alone," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room, clear and final. "It just meant you never had to see the price. I paid for your absence. I paid for it with my silence, with my invisibility. I spent my whole life being steady so that no one would have to feel guilty for not showing up." My mother's eyes filled with tears. She looked away. Shamed, Evan, the golden boy, the son around which our family had always turned, spoke for the first time. His voice was a mumble. "I'm sorry, Delilah. I'm sorry I took up all the time, the games, the car. I'm sorry." I looked at my brother, the star, the reason. "It wasn't your fault, Evan," I said, and I meant it. "You didn't set the schedule. You just played the game. It wasn't one person. It was a habit. It was the family habit. We were all just playing our parts. Mom was the manager. Dad was the mechanic. You were the star." "And what were you?" my father asked, his voice raw. "I was the audience," I said. And I got tired of sitting in an empty theater. The silence that followed was different. It was not tense. It was heavy. But it was the weight of understanding, of a truth finally placed on the table for all of us to see. After a moment, I stood up and cleared the plates. I returned from the kitchen. I was holding two things. One was a simple cheesecake. The other was 2 tickets. I placed the tickets on the table, between my parents. "My new foundation," I said, "is having its first community advisory meeting. It's next week. I'm speaking. These are for you." My mother picked one up. Her fingers trembled. "Front row," she whispered, as if she were reading a sacred text. "Yes," I said. "Front row. But there's a new rule. I pointed. They both looked closer. On each ticket, I had taken a black permanent marker and written in my neat data entry handwriting, "Seat not held past 7 p.m." My father looked at the ticket. He looked at me. He nodded. Not a grudge, not a complaint, just a nod. He understood. It was a contract. It was a boundary. "We'll be early," he said. My mother just clutched the ticket to her chest. The doorbell rang. It was 8 o'clock. Dessert. "They're here," I said, and went to the door. My family looked confused. "Who?" my mother asked. I opened the door. Ruth Halverson, the substitute teacher, was there, holding a box of cookies. Ibo Adeyemi was beside her, holding a bottle of sparkling apple cider, his smile as bright as the courthouse lights. "Delilah," Ruth boomed, walking in and giving me a hug that was real, a hug that was meant to be felt. "We came. We brought dessert." Ibo clapped me on the shoulder. "The new executive director," he said, his voice full of pride. "We would not miss this." I led them back to the table. My parents and Evan were standing, their faces a mask of utter, profound confusion. They recognized them. From the news, from my social media post. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "You're," she whispered. "You're the ones who—" "The ones who got the seats," Ibo finished for her, his smile never wavering, his voice kind. "A 12, I was a 13. It was a great honor." I stood between my two new worlds. I looked at my old family, the family of my blood, the ones who had left the seats empty. Then I looked at my new family, the family of my choosing, the witnesses who had filled them. "Mom," I said, my voice clear and strong. "Dad, Evan, I want you to meet my friends. This is Ruth Halverson, and this is Ibrahim Ibo Adeyemi." I put my hand on Ruth's shoulder, and then on Ibo's. "This," I said, making sure my parents met my eyes, "is the audience that gave me the courage to speak out loud." My parents were silent, utterly, completely silent. They were, for the first time in their lives, face to face with the consequence of their absence. They were meeting the people who had replaced them. They were hearing me list, in my own apartment, the names of the people who had shown up. And their names were not on the list. The rest of the evening was different. Ruth and Ibo were forces of nature. They were warm and loud and funny. They told stories about their own lives, their own struggles. They did not know the deep, dark history of our family. They just knew me. They treated me not as a steady daughter or a difficult problem, but as a colleague, as a leader. My family just watched. They were quiet. They were, for the first time, in the back row. By 9:30, they were gone. Ruth and Ibo helped me clear the plates. My parents and Evan left, with quiet goodbyes and thank you. I was alone, washing the last of the dishes. My apartment was quiet again. I was blowing out the candle on the table when my phone buzzed. I picked it up. A new message, from Mom. I opened it. It was 4 words. No emojis, no exclamation points, no, "I'm sorry." No, "We'll make it up to you." It just said, "I am proud of you." I looked at the words. It was a start. It was a new piece of data. It was not an excuse. It was, finally, a fact. I smiled. A small, tired, real smile. I turned off the message. I blew out the last candle. The scent of wax and smoke filled the room. Even family. I thought, needs to learn how to be on time. The chamber was a theater of polished oak and brass seals. The lights were bright, almost hot, the kind that leaves no room for shadows. This was not a corporate meeting. It was a public hearing. The Denver City Council was in a special session to discuss immigrant labor protections and the ethics of surveillance technology. My actions at Northbridge had kicked a hole in the wall, and now the city wanted to see exactly what was inside. A man from Northbridge spoke first. He was from the senior public relations team, someone I had never met, someone whose job it was to look pained and sincere. He read a prepared statement. Northbridge had, he said, completed its internal investigation. Mr. Braden Kells had been terminated for cause, citing gross violations of the corporate code of ethics. The company, he added, was in full cooperation with the district attorney's office. And then, the pivot, he announced, his voice full of forced pride, that Northbridge was fully committing to its $2 million seed funding of the new, entirely independent open chair initiative, led by its creator and found, Ms. Delilah Cook. I was next. I was not there as a victim. I was there as the executive director. I stood at the podium and the microphones hummed. I looked at the council, at the cameras in the back. My work is focused on the data, I began, my voice clear and steady. The Open Chair Initiative is currently anonymizing the Open Seat module for its full public release. We are in the process of uploading the data to a secure open-source repository. The independent audit firm of Cranmer & Lowe is overseeing our data scrubbing protocol, ensuring that all proprietary and personal information is irrevocably anonymized before we release the code to our NGO partners. As I spoke, I heard a small noise, a disturbance at the back of the chamber. I looked up. The large clock on the wall read 7:05 p.m. My parents, Miguel and Joanne Cook, were standing at the entrance. They were breathless, their coats still buttoned. They were holding the 2 tickets I had given them. I watched as they looked toward the front row, the 2 seats I had reserved, and I watched their faces fall. Those seats were not empty. Ruth Halverson and Ibo Adeyemi were sitting in them. I had invited them as the first official board members of the Open Chair Initiative. Their invitations, like my parents, had specified the time. An usher, a polite man with a city badge, intercepted my parents. He looked at their tickets. He saw the black ink note I had written. Seat not held past 7 p.m. He pointed to the clock. Then he gestured, politely, to the overflow section against the back wall. My mother's face flushed. I saw her begin to form a word, to protest. But my father, in a movement that was so small I almost missed it, put his hand on her arm. He looked at the usher. He looked at the back wall. And he nodded. He accepted the terms. He turned, and my mother followed him, and they went, quietly, to stand in the back of the room. I had not paused my speech. I had not missed a beat. I felt nothing in that moment but the cold, clean click of a data point logging. A rule had been set. A boundary had been tested. A consequence had been delivered. I turned back to the council. I had 7 minutes. I learned about this country, I said, by counting empty seats. I grew up in a place that taught me that if you are self-reliant, you do not need recognition. But I learned in the corporate world that this silence is dangerous. It is mistaken for absence. It is an invitation for your work to be stolen, for your credit to be erased, for your seat to be given to someone who did not earn it. The Open Chair Initiative is my answer. It is a policy to fill those seats. It is a technical, systemic solution to ensure that the most vulnerable among us are not erased by a clerical error, by a missed deadline, or by a manager who fails to show up for them. We are taking the empty symbolic chairs of my childhood, and we are turning them into real, functional, funded policies of presence. I finished. There was a moment of silence, then a strong, solid wave of applause. The council president, a sharp woman named Alvarez, gavelled the room quiet. Thank you, Ms. Cook. This brings us to the procurement aspect of this affair. Her eyes were cold as she looked at the Northbridge PR man. As part of our investigation, the ethics office at Northbridge, as a city vendor, was required to turn over all relevant materials to this body. She motioned to an aide. We have one such piece of evidence regarding the city's procurement policies. A speaker crackled. The room went utterly silent, and then Braden Kells's voice filled the chamber. It was from the audio file I had submitted, the one he had been so arrogant as to let me record. Look, his voice echoed, smooth and confident. The vendor just needs the code. How we handle the consulting fee is a separate matter. 20%, wired to the LLC, that's just how we do business. A little self-dealing. It's the cost of entry. A collective, sharp intake of breath. The Northbridge PR man looked like he was going to be physically sick. The council president hit a button. The audio cut off. Her voice was like ice. As of this hearing, this council is drafting a new zero-tolerance procurement regulation. We will be citing this audio as Exhibit A. This city will not do business with those who engage in self-dealing at the expense of our citizens. She looked at me, a small, fierce smile. Therefore, this council now moves to pass Resolution 40B. The City of Denver will officially fund the Open Chair Initiative with a grant to open 3 new advisory centers in the county to ensure our immigrant workforce is protected from precisely this kind of exploitation. She looked at the front row. We also accept Ms. Cook's board recommendations. Ms. Ruth Halverson will lead community training. Mr. Ibrahim Adeyemi will coordinate community outreach. The gavel struck the block. The sound was like a door locking. It passed unanimously. Ms. Cook, the president said, the formality returning. Would you care to make a closing statement? I stepped back to the podium. The hot lights felt like a spotlight on a stage. I looked at the front row, at Ruth and Ebo, who were both crying and smiling, and I looked at the back row, at my parents, standing against the wall, watching me. Thank you, I said. The day I became a citizen, I gave away my parents' 2 front-row seats to 2 strangers. I gave them to people who needed a place, to people who understood what it meant to show up. I took a breath. Tonight, with your help, I am giving away so many more seats. We are funding and building and dedicating hundreds of new seats for all the people who are still standing outside, in the cold, waiting for someone, anyone, to open the door. I finished. The chamber rose to its feet. The applause was a storm, a physical thing. I watched my parents. They were standing. They were clapping, their hands held high. They were not pushing their way to the front. They were not calling my name. They were not trying to make it about them. They were, for the first time in my entire life, simply showing up. Correctly, they were respecting the boundaries. They were the audience, in the seats they had earned, proud of the person on the stage. I stepped down. As I walked up the aisle, I passed a young girl, no older than 10, with dark, curious eyes. She was a page for one of the council members. She had been watching me, rapt, through the whole hearing. I stopped. I reached into my coat pocket. The spare flag pin, the one I had taken from the red envelope, was still there. I leaned down, and I pressed the small, sharp pin into her hand. "What's this?" she whispered. "It's a reminder." I whispered back. When it's your turn, when you are the one on the stage, you make sure you give your seat to the person who needs it the most. The news cameras were panning out, capturing the end of the night. They caught the shot of the wide plaza outside. A light snow was beginning to fall, dusting the city. And on the electronic ticker tape sign on the building opposite, the digital letters scrolled past, bright and clear. Seats for those who show up. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I did not need to look. I pulled it out. A new group text. To Ruth and Ibo, I typed one line. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., we build the first center. I put the phone away. I did not look for my parents. They knew where to find me now. I looked up. Through the high glass ceiling of the atrium, the American flag was waving, lit from below, stark against the dark sky. I thought of the note taped to my old refrigerator. Do the work, even if no one claps. I smiled. But today, the work was done, and the entire room had just learned how to clap for the right person. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please, comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to connect and share thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and show your support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.